So I had that first meeting with OneTaste leadership, and, they made the basic pitch to me. They were like, we're the Whole Foods of sexuality. We're the organic, good for you version of sexuality. They were very much like, our practice is wholesome and helps heal people.
Did you have any spidey senses going off during that first thing?
Not a ton.
You were like, okay, this is kind of...
I was like, okay, this isn't... I mean, there's so much to be intrigued about. You're like, how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the benefits? But yes, you're right. Then I started asking around a little on my own, finding people who had been involved in OneTaste, and started to hear from people who were former customers, former members, that they felt like they'd been exploited by this company. Some people spoke about feeling like they'd been exploited financially, so they said that they'd been pressured to take on debt in order to buy expensive courses, which could cost upwards of $30,000 for like an intensive course. And then some of them talked about feeling like they had been exploited sexually, feeling like they had been taught or, pressured to have sex with potential customers in order to have those customers buy courses and support the company financially. And it's this subtle, it's not black and white. It's like, for a lot of those people, they also felt like they had learned things of value during their time at OneTaste, or that it had been this like interesting, helpful, sometimes even healing experience. Yeah. And at the same time, simultaneously harmful. That was kind of the intriguing part of it.
That's how all of them are. There's always something.
Yeah, they wouldn't grow and expand if they weren't appealing and fun for a period.
Yeah, if it was just bad, it wouldn't be interesting.
The first 3 months with the Bhagwan up in Oregon, it looks fucking great. The Rajneeshis are partying.
A lot of cults are fun.
Yeah.
You join a cult and it feels like you've discovered a special purpose. You're part of this special group that has a special knowledge about like your new mission in life. Yeah. You're going to change the world. You have these cool new friends. Everyone's really excited.
You've unbridled yourself from society in essence. You've declared, I'm going to try a different approach to this. So you feel your ego is also stroked by
I think that's how conspiracy theories work too. Same situation where it's like, oh, we're in this special group that knows something most people don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I want to say, you write a piece in 2018. Yeah. This becomes a humongous kind of viral thing that really shakes the foundation of this place.
Totally.
But now let's talk about Nicole and where she comes from, because she's a fascinating character. She's hyper intelligent.
Totally.
Yeah, she's like attractive, hyper intelligent, seemingly fearless, confident, charismatic.
One might say.
Yes.
Nicole is the main character of OneTaste, of like this company, of everything that it stands for. She is the creator, the visionary, the founder. There was technically another co-founder, but let's be real, like Nicole is the main person. And she is a fascinating and complicated person. She grew up in the Bay Area. Currently, she's in her late 50s, so I think that she was growing up in the 70s. And she had a really difficult childhood, which is something that we get into in the book, where her father was a convicted child sex abuser.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Single mom from Michigan.
Yes, single mom.
Dad's in and out.
Yes, she was raised by a single mom. Also, maybe her grandmother was in the picture. But in her own retelling / as much as I've been able to corroborate with other people who knew her, she really loved her dad, even though he was this somewhat absent figure in her life. He had other families, many other children, several other wives, not at the same time, but he had an itinerant life elsewhere. And she adored him. And according to court records and according to her own retelling, he was a convicted child sex abuser. He went to jail for this at least once when she was younger, and then again when she was in her 20s. And in that case, he was arrested and charged and then died pretty soon after. So there was never like a conviction for the second one. But one of the alleged victims in that case was like his granddaughter.
It's not hard to extrapolate that she might have been a victim.
What's complicated is over the years, she has spoken about her father's sex abuse history, but she has often sidestepped the question of whether he ever abused her. And I wanted to treat this subject really carefully and sensitively in the book. But I did find people who knew her when she was in her 20s and around that time who told me that she told them that he had sexually abused her.
Yeah.
And she does have a piece of writing that was once public and is not anymore, in which not only does she kind of allude to this, but she actually spins it in this very complex way where she suggests that she perhaps initiated it or was seeking, and keep in mind that what is being discussed here is a scenario in which she would have been like under 10.
Yeah. And her public addressing of it evolves, and I want to save to the end as it's unraveling where she ultimately goes with it, which is like, I couldn't fucking believe what was coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's a competitive little girl. She's a spelling bee person, or at least according to her. She's very bright.
Yeah, she's like an intense person.
Yeah,
and I think that has been clear. Anyone who knew her knew that she had this. And she also, I think, liked to play that up in her own retelling of her biography, that she was someone who was like inspired by intensity and edges and that kind of thing.
Right. So she goes to Temple, but just for a year. Then Temple University.
Temple University, it's
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you meant the temple.
Oh,
yeah.
Sure. Could have easily. We are talking about spirituality and ohms. But she returns to San Francisco after a year.
Yeah.
And now she finds herself in some kind of communal living situations. She also loves meth and she loves psychedelics.
Yeah.
So she's a psychonaut.
Her 20s are a string of what I would describe as intense experiences. According to people who knew her, that involves meth use, copious amounts of LSD, sex work. She has talked about being an escort, a stripper, and she also ran an art gallery. So, I mean, some of that was a little bit more pedestrian. But she has described this era of her life, and other people who knew her have corroborated this, that it was, quite extreme. She wasn't really living like the normal path of like getting a job. And she allegedly spent 3 years or so living in what she later refers to as an acid house, a house with a bunch of other women in San Francisco where they did tons of acid.
Yes.
I mean, this is all a mix of her retelling. And she is someone who is very good at telling stories about her life in a way that supports a point that she's trying to make at the time.
One thing I'll applaud her for is she doesn't really ever take kind of a victim narrative, which of course is a tenet of this.
Yeah.
But there's no sense that at any point she was a victim in any of these scenarios. But she meets a dude, Erwin, at a party.
Yes.
And this guy kind of hits her with this notion of, what's it called then?
They call it deliberate orgasm.
Deliberate orgasm.
So the way she tells this story is that she went to a party and she met a guy who is sometimes described as a Buddhist monk. Erwan had lived at an ashram for some point. I don't know if he considered himself a monk, but whatever.
He's in his 20s, good looking, a little younger than her.
Yeah.
His name is Erwan?
Erwan. Yeah,
I thought it was Erwin.
Not Erwan, like
the grocery store.
Not the grocery store. It's spelled ERWAN.
Oh, okay, got it.
But he, in the retellings, he supposedly comes up to her at this party and says, "I'd like to introduce you to a sexuality practice." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "I'd like to introduce you to a sexuality practice." And she says yes. And I don't think they do it right then and there. I believe they met up later. He shows her this meditative clitoral stroking practice. And he talks about how, like, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to stay clothed. You're going to remove your clothing from the waist down.
It's 15 minutes as well, right?
15 minutes, probably. They like to use the word pussy, so I'm going to use it. Within OneTaste, for a period of time, they preferred to use the terms pussy and cock to describe female and male genitalia, in part because it had charge to it.
Right.
Because it was this provocative word.
But again, I'm so confused by this because it's like it's supposed to
Give
be...
us a program, Monica. Jesus.
It's supposed to be you're not supposed to climax. It's supposed to be just meditative. And then it's also like the most sexually charged thing possible.
I would say the way to think about it is what OneTaste was eventually selling was, these courses on orgasmic meditation, which is a pretty fringe and provocative idea, right? Like most people are not going to be like, great, sign me up. You might need a little convincing. So in order to do so, they did try to make it quite safe seeming, clinical. Right. That's why it's like the 15 minutes, the prescribed script, the like all these safeguards.
And they don't want you to not climax. They just are saying it's much more, it's bigger than just the climax.
They're like climax, like sure, but there's more.
It's just very the juxtaposition of like.
But then when you get deeper inside, that's where some of the stranger things come up. So if you're sensing a discordance, you're like, it doesn't line up.
Yeah.
It's probably because the outer pitch was a little bit more buttoned up, or as buttoned up as you could make clitoral stroking.
Right.
Yeah.
And then for those who became more deeply involved, like they worked for the company, they lived in a communal residence with other OneTaste people, they made this company and this lifestyle their whole life. then that's where you get into some of there are layers.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly.
Okay, so she has this experience. She describes it as quite transcendent. And for her, it's the highest level of intimacy she's ever experienced. And so she's converted from that one experience.
As she tells it, it's a pivotal moment in her life. She experiences this thing. She even likes to say that she was about to join a Buddhist monastery and then threw out that plan and was
this was supposed to be her wild week.
Yes,
before.
Just kidding. I'm going to pursue this meditative clitoral stroking practice.
And now this guy, Erwan, he is working under another guy who is broken off from yet another organization that started much earlier in the 70s or?
Yeah, it's a little complicated, but essentially the origins of this, what becomes orgasmic meditation, was these two other groups that had a relation to each other. One was a spinoff of the other. And they taught a practice called deliberate orgasm.
Yeah.
And both of those groups were less business-oriented than OneTaste. They were a little bit more like insular, and they were both run by men. And deliberate orgasm was like a little bit more freewheeling. Like it wasn't 15 minutes. It didn't have as many guardrails. So Nicole ends up going with Erwan to like become part of one of these groups. And what essentially happens is she learns how to run a community like this. And she learns the basics of this practice. And after that, she's there for a couple of years. And after that, she decides, I want to do this on my own.
It has the same trajectory as like some of the Christianity movements in the country where it's like there just keeps being these schisms that break off into their own. And they all need a little bit of a proprietary approach to justify why they're a different thing. But it's all pretty much the same thing.
I mean, what's interesting is, they all share this lineage. And if you want to trace it far enough back, there's even many shared lineages back to like Est and what is now Landmark Forum, and there's probably a connection to Nexium, and there's it's like this tree essentially of personal development, personal transformation groups. They often have a tie to each other.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to like map out that genealogy,
you have Esalen in there. You have all these.
Yeah.
It's a perfect area to be in.
Yeah, and you'll see that certain ideas that were popular at OneTaste show up in some of these other groups as well. For example, like taking 100% responsibility for your experience. Like I have friends who have taken leadership seminars where that is a big tenet.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot of value to that idea.
Yeah.
And it can be taken too far and used to like gaslight people into thinking that everything that happens to them is their
It's
fault.
impossible to be a victim.
Exactly.
Yeah, someone jumps out of an alley.
The victim narrative is like a really central part of understanding this. And what you said earlier about Nicole never seeming like a victim, like we can come back to it, but that is a key thing because it is both empowering and it can be used to convince people that, well, if they're feeling harmed or if they're feeling like someone has been hurting them, that's their problem.
Yeah.
And if you couldn't, to be a victim is to have such a small-minded mentality, or it's only for the weak-minded to think of themselves as a victim.
Yeah.
And that can be really convenient. If there's no victims, then there's no perpetrators. So,
Yes.
oh, how nice.
Exactly.
It's a nice, clean setup. Just though, I think it's interesting to say that the Morehouse, there were 100 Morehouses at one point. A lot of these have been really successful. I just watched the Synanon you talked about a little bit in the book, but I watched that doc and I was like, it's crazy how big Synanon was. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're all kind of borrowing from each other. They all kind of a little bit laced with some Buddhism.
Yeah, Morehouse, we won't spend too much on it, but basically, they had this like network of houses across the U.S. that were all painted purple, and they all had this like philosophy about living with like more pleasure, more fun, and
is that a different one or is that connected to this?
That's one of the two groups that taught deliberate orgasm.
That's where the orgasm thing kind of started.
But every once in a while, when you mention that, there's someone who's like, "Oh, I know someone who lived in one of those purple houses," or I know like they're sometimes called the purple people.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, so she breaks out on her own. She's having kind of middling success. She gets a warehouse in San Francisco and invites people to live in it.
Yes. So when she starts OneTaste, they start off by having like a center in San Francisco where they have like a yoga studio and they start offering classes. And this is in 2004 or so. And pretty quickly, within a couple of years, they also rent a warehouse down the street. And that becomes the first communal residence of OneTaste participants. And that starts like a whole history of like OneTaste people living together and having that be kind of like the inner experience, the kind of like once you get more involved and you join, you might.
Then you're living it.
Yeah. So for a lot of people who get involved in OneTaste, you might join and just take a few classes and be like, great, I learned what I needed. See you later.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who join and then they're like, I want more. I want to be more immersed in this world. And the path that a lot of those people end up following is they would quit their old job and start to work at OneTaste, usually on their sales team, selling courses to other people. They would move out of their old home and move into one of the OneTaste communal residences. And they would gradually stop spending as much time with their friends and family who didn't understand their orgasmic life.
Yeah.
And start spending all their time. Start spending all their time with people at OneTaste. And that is kind of how it can advance for certain people.
Okay, so it takes off. She decides to start franchising and selling more and more, and it starts growing into a pretty good size.
Yeah, they have offices not just, they start in San Francisco, but they end up with offices in LA, San Diego, Austin, Boulder, New York, London, Australia.
Now, here's a tough question. How much do you think the news and media bears some responsibility? Because this was like a fledgling nothing. She does a demo in 2008 and the New York Times reports on it.
Yeah.
And that's when the explosion happens.